Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special mid-year summer-themed edition of Talking Knowledge and Thoroughness. This is going to be like the Talking Knowledge and Thoroughness that you're used to, just more focused on special topics and really specialized material. So first want to introduce a man who needs no introduction, but President Schmidt, thank you for joining us today. And I like your shirt, you know, I feel like it's a nice summery vibe today.
Well, in fairness, I think I was told I needed to wear it.
Oh, okay.
which it took me a while to warm up to, but then I figured, if we're going to do it, we need to go all in.
Right.
So I have a gift for you.
Oh, you have a gift. Oh, wonderful.
So here you go. I didn't rinse it out yet, but so don't put your water in there, and it does light up.
Ooh, look at that. I feel like,
And I got one for myself as well. So.
Look at that.
So just some props to really get us in the moment.
We're really getting in the vibe. We're really getting in the vibe of summer. We love it. Well, thank you for the wonderful gift.
It stops in about 20 seconds. So.
Okay, cool. Well, wait the 20 seconds. You won't be distracted the whole time. But so we really appreciate you coming out and for the wonderful gifts here and really leaning into the fun, casual conversation we're going to have here today. So just to introduce myself, my name is Savannah Crooks. I am the current president of the Young Alumni Council, or YAC. The YAC is a group within the Rensselaer Alumni Association, or the RAA, that focuses on young and future alumni programming. So that's actually the special topic of this Talking Knowledge and Thoroughness, is just all topics around what young alumni are concerned about and what we really want to know about at RPI and kind of in the world, because there's a lot of things going on. So speaking of things going on, the YAC recently participated in tabled at 0 Year Reunion, which is an event that honors the graduating class as their first foray into being an alumni. And we worked with the alumni engagement team at that event, and we had a great time and got to meet all of our newest alumni. So can you tell the RPI community, who could not be there, a little bit about this newly graduated class of 2025 and what interactions you had with them while on campus?
Yeah, sure. They graduated in May, and commencement was a lot of fun. We had two commencement speakers. Lisa Sue, who's the CEO of AMD. I knew Lisa when she was a grad student at MIT, and we stayed in touch, and it was great to have her come to RPI. She knows the region because she spent her early career with IBM. And then we had RJ Scaringe, and for RJ, it was his second visit to campus that calendar year, because in the fall of 24, he came back for the reunion, but because it was his dad's 50th reunion. Oh. And he brought his kids and everything. So we've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with RJ. And so I thought that both speeches to the graduating class were terrific. They're online if you want to watch them, but I think really inspirational. This class, when I reflected, and as I was preparing my remarks for commencement, I reflected sort of, so what was their experience as in their 4 years for those that are graduating, or, obviously the architecture students were there for 2 years earlier, but the bulk of the class was there for 1 year before I arrived. Mm-hmm. So the year before I arrived, I'm sure RPI had all sorts of COVID protocols, just like MIT did, which made it difficult to engage and interact and so on. And so what was interesting was that first year I was here, so their sophomore year, that's a year that we really started to peel back all of the COVID restrictions. The masks came down, and there was a lot more interaction. And it was, when I reflect on it, there are a couple of things that stood out. One was we did my inauguration, and it was in October. And one of the things the team decided to do is let's have a set of food trucks on 86 Field during the day of the inauguration, and then they actually broadcast the inauguration on a gigantic screen on 86 Field. Yeah. And it was a huge hit. I mean, the students were all, and I think we might have stopped classes that day. So students came down, they were enjoying the free truck food, mm-hmm. And they subsequently told me they called it the Marty Party. But I think what was interesting in that moment is it's kind of almost like this, you're just feeling the release of not having all those COVID restrictions and mm-hmm. the ability to celebrate and so on and so forth. So that was really cool and a great experience. That was tempered by the loss of Alana Toe. So in September, early September actually, of their sophomore year, one of their classmates, Alana, passed away due to a terrible accident. She was on a scooter and hit a car. And I think it really, I think it impacted everybody. It's because when you look at that, such a promising person, and to see, to lose them like that. And so it was a kind of a bittersweet year in some respects. Junior year was, of course, we had October 7th. And that was a high wire act, I think, for all institutions. But I was so proud of our student body and the fact that they could, come together, and we held an interfaith vigil in the fall. I think it was around about a month after the attack by Hamas. And there were a few dust-ups along the way where some student groups wanted to be formed. There were concerns about it. And that was a year that I really came to appreciate the huge value of the student-run union. Because in my mind, what it does is it facilitates the students having vigorous discussions about sometimes challenging topics. And that's what transpired. Every time there was a concern about what was happening in Israel or in Palestine, and they worked it out. And so I think it was just really remarkable. And then you roll into the senior year, and I would say one of the things that marks the senior year was, of course, the change in administration. A lot of executive orders and a lot of uncertainty, concern, particularly on the part of our international students in terms of wondering, is ICE coming for me? Is my visa going to get revoked? And so it was a lot of, just everybody trying to be mindful of that. And again, I think what was impressive with the student body was how the empathy they displayed for members of our community that were being significantly impacted by this. So in that respect, it was kind of a really interesting arc. And with respect to the class itself, one of the things we started, I think it was midway through my first year, is I started meeting with student leaders once a month. And so the provost and I do that every month. So the Grand Marshal, the President of the Union, the class presidents, various officers, President of the student athlete, so in total maybe a dozen or 15 or 16 student leaders. And so it was a great opportunity to get to know the class and how they were doing. So that was my experience with that student body.
Yeah, thank you for giving us such a deep window into the students on campus. Because I know I graduated in 2020, and after COVID, it was just a little different for a while. So, but when you think about the class of 2025, you gave us a window into their day-to-day life. But what would you say their legacy was? What do you think they left to the RPI community?
That's a really complex question, and when I thought about that, one of the things that struck me. The first few months I was on campus, I did my sort of listening tour. And when the students arrived in September, I would meet with groups of students, 20 at a time. I think I met with about 200 or 400 students. I don't know exactly how many. We met in the student union. And I would just ask them, what do you love about RPI, and what do you hope to see different or change or improved? And one of the things that really jumped out at me was how many students said they were worried about the loss of traditions, that things that always happened that weren't possible to happen during COVID. And so I think there was a lot of intentionality around this class about trying to restore traditions. And getting people to remember that the Big Red Freakout is something you go to. And so I was really impressed with that. But the other thing was, this is a class that created a new tradition.
Oh. Yeah,
and so it's called Stair Days, I should say.
Multiple days.
Yes, yes. So, and this wasn't the case when I was a student at RPI, but usually in I think it's around November maybe, there's chains that go up on some of the stairs on campus, and that's because we have difficulty either keeping the ice off of them or the snow off of them, or they're very particularly treacherous in cold weather, or maybe they're next to a building where we're worried about snow coming down and landing on them. So we close off these stairs. And then usually around tax day, April 15th, the chains come down. Okay, so what they do is they go the day that the chains go up. The pep band is there. They have treats, and and they celebrate the chains going up, and then in April they do the rinse and repeat and celebrate the chains going down. So I'm really amplifying this because I really think this is such a cool tradition. But what was interesting was I congratulated the class during commencement on their creating this new tradition, but I sent an email to Paul Corey, who's going to graduate this year. He was a junior last year. But Paul was one of the people that helped create it. And I said, Paul, what was the deal with Stair Day? How did that come about? And so I'm going to read you what he sent me an email because this is really cool. So he said, and I quote, "It was really just born out of a desire to create new traditions and to lean into the absurd humor of taking something very mundane and making an elaborate and ritualized celebration of it. It was also motivated by the hope of taking something that is a source of inconvenience and complaints, closing half the stairs, and embracing it. Sort of like how so many cultures celebrate the changing of seasons." So I just thought that was brilliant.
That is absolutely brilliant. I feel like that's a very true RPI spirit too. If we take something and then we're like, we don't want to complain about it, we want to do it, we want to lift it up and celebrate it, and I love that. And I know I had a similar experience to you about the traditions where I had to tell some freshmen what hockey line was, and I was like, what do you mean? It's hockey line. It's such an icon. So I'm really glad that they were able to hold on to a lot of those old traditions, but then create a legacy of their own there.
Hockey line is on life support, so we have to figure out a way to get it back.
Okay, we'll get it back. Don't worry.
New coach, new day. When we get back in the championship way, it'll get there.
We got it. But speaking of legacy, since becoming the president, you've gotten to interact with a lot of different alumnus and alumna. Can you speak to one of the various alumna or alumni who've inspired you over the years?
How much time do you have?
Yeah, only one. So.
Oh, just one? No, I can't do one. I mean, look, there are a couple that when I was thinking about that question. Julie, and I failed to dig up Julie's last name, but Julie was a student who really leaned into sustainability and was very passionate about it. And I think made a lot of improvements to RPI in the way in which we think about that. We've got a lot of work to do, but I just love the intentionality and the earnestness and also the thoughtfulness with which she did the work she did there. Gabriel used to come to all of my town halls and ask me questions, always good questions, sometimes pointed. He now works at Apple, and usually when I'm out in California, I get to see Gabriel at various events, and so he certainly sticks in my mind. And Tallulah Patch, who is also out in Northern California, so we get to see her from time to time. When Lynn and I first came to RPI after I accepted the position, it was in, I think, March or April. We came out for a couple days, and they arranged for us to get a campus tour in a golf cart.
Oh, nice.
And our tour guide was Meg Shea. Meg Shea graduated last year, I think, and she might have got her master's, but she's a star on the lacrosse team, but she was also from Massachusetts. So Lynn and I got to know Meg very well, and she was sort of a good friend. A lot of the student athletes, particularly the hockey players, we get to know them really well through, you sort of feel like you know them because we go to all the hockey games, so you kind of get to know their names. And then I guess the other person that sticks out for me is Casey Champagne. So I got to meet a couple of graduating seniors the first year I was president, so they would have graduated in 2023. Mm. And I met a group of about 6 of these women who were seniors, basically to kind of understand what was it like, because I wasn't here, and how am I going to address you if I have no idea what your experience was, particularly through COVID. Boy, did I get an earful. But it was great. It was great. And so I was able to, at that point I looked and said, well, I got to rewrite my commencement address because this is dead on arrival because it's totally tone deaf to their lived experience. But Casey and I have stayed in touch, and she invited me to her graduation party. It was the first person to invite me to their graduation party. Her invitation to her graduation party was a picture of her when I think she was 8 or 9, I don't even know, in the Houston Fieldhouse. Oh. Lifelong RPI hockey fan and family RPI affiliates. So there are a lot of stories like that.
So not only did she inspire you, but she was really a legacy herself in Troy and at the Houston Fieldhouse. That's really amazing. So switching gears a little bit here, we just graduated the class of 2025, which means we get to welcome a new class of alumni, but also a bunch of new alumni starting on campus. The freshmen, I think you said, moved in on Saturday, most of them, and are starting their NRB journeys. So what does the class of 2029 have to look forward to at RPI, especially in regards to the project, the progress and updates you've made as part of the strategic plan?
Yeah, well, it's a work in progress, but I think, first about the class, demographically, it looks very similar to previous classes in terms of gender balance, in terms of where it states that they're drawn from. But this was a crazy year. Last year, as you may know, we did not achieve our goal of filling the class. And that was a pretty significant hit to the budget financially. And so we really leaned into the best practices around enrollment management. And what we did was we set a goal of between 1,350 and 1,500 students we wanted. That was our goal. The year prior, we brought in, I think, 13 or something like that. So, but it was really an amazing year of spending time with these admitted students. The admitted student days on campus were really dynamic. Everybody got engaged in this exercise in the sense that, when it's interesting, when the class size is down, the union's budget goes down. So everybody wins if we hit our class numbers.
Right.
And so the students, the faculty, staff, everybody engaged in making sure we presented an authentic RPI and that we got people that were excited about RPI to come. And then it got really crazy because on May 1, when everybody's supposed to deposit and say they're coming, as an example, Syracuse University sent out a bunch of letters to students who had been admitted to Syracuse University but had not deposited on May 1. And the letter said, we'll give you $80,000 over 4 years of financial aid, but this is a limited time offer because we only have a finite number of those. So get back to us as soon as you can. That's an example of what happened, but because a lot of campuses didn't hit their number. And so they were opening up their wait lists, and even to the point where one institution I won't name reopened their wait list 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And I think personally what was happening was they were relying on a large number of international students who didn't get their visas. So the fact that we've got this class here, and I told you 1,350 to 1,500. It was 1,550 on May 1, but we knew there would be melt. There's always melt, and we melted down to about 1,430. So feeling pretty good about it. So really excited to have that class. And I think what they can expect as they get here is we've made a lot of changes in the organization to try and deliver a better student experience. And so, for example, one of the things we did was we moved the student life function under the provost's office, which is really important because if you look at programs like the Arch, it's really a mixture of student life, career planning, which is linked to that, and the academics. And there was not enough conversation between those two organizations. And so Rebecca did a tremendous job bringing the organization together. So I think we've made meaningful improvements in the Arch in a way in which I think is going to be really beneficial to these students. So I think they can see that. And there are a number of things like that which we're working our way through. And I think with the stable class size, we won't be scrambling to find instructors and so on and so forth. Because it's very interesting. When the summer I started, RPI had intended to bring in like 1,600 students, but they got 2,000. So on the one hand, you say, oh, that's really cool. More people want to come to RPI than we thought. But it's not cool if you don't have places for them to sleep
Right.
or enough instructors. And so, you go from 2,000 and then the next year we're where we wanted to be. And then the next year we're down, to 1,300. So that kind of volatility just, I think makes it really hard for us to deliver a consistent experience to the students. And so that's one of the other things I think we'll be able to do better.
Right, keep that consistency
Yeah.
so you can like make it a similar experience for everyone
Yeah.
and involved. That's awesome. So another thing that the class of 2029 has to look forward to is the RPI strategic plan and the progress you've made on that. So tell me a little bit about the RPI strategic plan and where you are with it.
Yeah, thanks, Savannah. It's I'm really excited. I have to say, the 10-year vision document. I invite everybody to read. I think it's amazing. We wrote it basically a year and a half ago as we were developing it, but the things we predicted that would be of concern, the cost of education, everything, are really hitting home. And so I think the plan is right for the moment. That's what I would say first. So when you look at the 10-year vision, the 5-year plan, but what I'm excited about is for RPI to really move the needle, focus is critical. And so what we've done is over the course of the last several months or half a year, we've distilled our focus down to 3 areas. One is stabilizing enrollment management and extending educational reach. 2 is growing sponsored research. And 3 is increasing alumni engagement. So just in quick terms, stabilizing enrollment, we've talked a little bit about this notion of 1 year it's 2,000, 1 year it's 1,300. That volatility is unacceptable. And so what we've done is really start to modernize our practices, but also the opportunity that we have in front of us is to be much more analytical. So rather than admit a lot of students and see who comes, what's the phenotype of a student who's likely to come? And maybe we should just admit those students and then work our tail off to get them in. So, and we've added some new staff. The chief marketing officer will be on board in about a month. Our new head of enrollment management brings tremendous data analytics capabilities. And we have a new chief administrative officer who's been in higher ed his entire career, except for the last 3 years, he was at Amazon Web Services. So we've really upskilled the leadership around data and analytics that I think is going to help us on that enrollment management. But we also want to focus on transfers. So this year, we really leaned into that, and we've almost doubled the number of transfer students. A lot of work with Hudson Valley to do that. So I think that's really important. And extending educational reaches, we're looking at opportunities for how do we provide more educational opportunities without requiring students to come to RPI, to Troy. And we have some exciting things that we're working on there that I'm looking forward to share in the future. So that's that. Research is when I looked at RPI when I first arrived, I felt that we could do more research, but what we were missing was focusing our energy around find a few areas where we could put together larger teams and pursue larger grants. And so we've gone through an exercise of saying, what are those areas? And there are areas like biotech and life sciences, like semiconductors, like computing. And so we're doing that, and we're having some success getting larger research support in the door. We have the headwinds from Washington right now, so we're sort of treading water, but I really am bullish that as we do this more, we'll grow that sponsored research. And in the end of the day, it creates a more financially resilient RPI if you have multiple kind of revenue streams, if you want to think of it that way. But the other thing is that most of our undergraduates want to have opportunities to get into the research laboratory. And so creating more of those opportunities for growing research makes a lot of sense. Third one is alumni engagement. And that's just simply a situation where when you look at how many of our alumni annually engage with the university, either through participation in reunion or philanthropically, and if you take the latter, the high water mark are some of the Ivies where maybe 45% of their alumni annually contribute back. At MIT, I think the number might be around 25 or 28%. We're low, we're about 8%. And my view is we're low because we need to do more engagement with the alumni. We need to be, working with them, engaging with them, getting them excited about what's going on at RPI, creating opportunities for them to network with their peers, supporting the local clubs. Why should, if you're running the club in Boston, can we help you find a venue for the next thing? Can we help you get invitations out and so on and so forth? We haven't been able to do that. We haven't done that historically, even going back to when I was a student. So it's going to take time because people are going to need time to get warm up to this idea. But I think a lot about when I first took the job and talked to a lot of alumni, a common question I was asked is, how come I only hear from you when you need money? And I said, by the end of the year, I said, I actually know the answer to that question now. A, we need money, and B, we only have enough people to call you and ask for money, but not enough people to build a relationship with you. So we're changing that. And of those three priorities, I think the alumni engagement piece, if we work really hard at it over the next decade, it'll probably be the most profound thing we do for our next century.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you talked about with the alumni engagement of not only the treasure piece, which as you said is very important, but also their time and their talent, giving that back and just coming to events, being engaged, like maybe mentoring a student or something is super important to creating a vibrant RPI community. So I love that you touched on that. So.
And it was great, the Pi Day, we year on year, we've had great increases there as I think we're starting to reach out to more people, get people excited. So lots of work to do, but I think, like I said, it's the most important thing we're going to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, awesome. Another thing that the incoming class has to look forward to is the new RPI brand that was just released. So tell us about the new RPI brand and why it was chosen.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I mean, brands are most institutions rebrand on a regular basis. My era, it was the Bullet. And it's funny, I kind of liked it, but I kind of didn't when I was a student. In fact, it's now, the thing has faded, but I have a beer stein that had the Bullet on it. And I was like, I'm not, even to this day, I was like, I'm not sure how I felt about that. But anyway, but I do know that, when RPI went to the kind of Rensselaer plus the seal, one of the things I heard when I got back to RPI in that summer of 22, on my listening tour, I met with a lot of faculty and staff. And some of the staff that had been here for a long time, they were really exercised about that. They said, I don't like it, it's like, oh. But at the time, what was interesting is I was sort of thinking, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure where I land here, because in the spring, after we announced that I'd be RPI's president, but before I started, I would run into colleagues either at MIT or in Boston, and more than once I was asked how I felt about living in Rochester. So I was like, well, maybe it's good if we have RPI and Rensselaer, but I think what we've learned is that it can create some confusion. So we did a lot of work, looked at some of the old brands. There's a really funky one from like 1912, which is basically the surveyor's rod with the. So if you look at the seal, you can see in the middle of the seal the surveyor's rod, and it was just that. And then I think it said, I forget, but I was like, well, this is pretty interesting. So we looked at the arc of rebranding to the university, and where we landed is where we are, which is it's a kind of a very kind of modernistic font. They devised a new font, but what I think is so cool about it is the bar. And when you just look at it, you say, oh, okay, well, whatever. But what the intention is that the bar is sort of dynamic. So if it's presented on a digital format, like on a web page or something, it can evolve and change, and different features appear and disappear in it. And what it also presents is an opportunity to think about using that as a branding for, say, a club. So for example, they showed us one representation of the bar where they showed the music score. Oh. So imagine the art department being able to produce the brand, but use the brand, but with the bar, with that.
Yeah.
And so I think this opportunity for the community to sort of hack the bar and customize it, I think is a really exciting thing. And I think, so when people initially see it sometimes, and I was the same way, I'm like, oh, I don't know. But when you think about the potential of the bar, it's really cool. So I'm pretty excited about it. And I think going back to RPI is going to help us in another dimension, which is, sometimes not everybody can spell Rensselaer.
True.
So, if you've got to Google that, it's a little tough. But we live in a county named Rensselaer, and in this county there's a city or a town called Rensselaer. And so I think leaning into RPI and Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, I think is going to serve us well. And so pretty excited about it. And actually, I have a gift for you.
Another gift? Two gifts? I'm being spoiled today.
Keeps coming. So this is one example of using not very hitty, with the brand, with the bar there. And then And then in here is a shirt with.
Oh, look at that! We gotta show that to the camera there.
Literally arrived to the bookstore today.
Look at that, guys! We got the
see?
bar underneath. Look, that's fabulous. Thank you so much.
And I'm sure somebody's going to figure out a way to put a little LED strip under and make the bar.
Oh yeah, we can make it like our cups over here and
go.
have glow in the dark bar shirts. I love that. So. Hopefully, one of the new class of 2029 will figure out a way to do it. They're great. That will be their legacy on campus, is putting a light on the bar. So
Absolutely.
We love it. So it's really hard to believe in that just 4 short years that the class of 2029 is going to become young alumni and transition, make that really hard transition. But they're going to come into it with a great professional network ready to go, and with a great network of young alumni and alumni around them. So kind of switching topics here to kind of early career young alumni, being a professional is really tough, especially in this day and age. There's a lot of economic uncertainty and all of that. Can you tell us a little bit about your early career and maybe some of the challenges you faced early in your career?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Obviously, you've given me a hint at what you're going to ask.
Yeah.
I have to chuckle. And it's even funny being in this room because we're sort of in the lower level of the DCC. The round lecture room is right over there, and on the other side is where they used to have interviews for the co-op program. I don't know if they still do. There's little booths. So, I think it was end of my sophomore year. In the sophomore year, I interviewed for a co-op opportunity. And was really excited because I got an opportunity at RCA Labs, which at the time was in Princeton, New Jersey. That was really cool because Lynn was going to be working on the Jersey Shore. And so I was like, this is awesome. And then what happened is I got a letter from them saying, oops, we don't have as many co-ops as we thought. So I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So that was tough, and actually that summer I worked the night shift at a root beer bottling plant.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't recommend
That's
it.
a very left-hand turn. Okay.
Well, it was, it was hard to get a job at McDonald's back then. So anyway, so first attempt in the career side didn't really work out too well. However, I did, after my junior year, land a co-op at a company just outside Philadelphia. And it was a great experience. And it was also, I had finished junior year in electrical engineering, and, they had me building circuits and populating circuit boards and things like that. So being able to get that experience in the major was really valuable. And actually they invited me back after my senior year before I went off to graduate school. When I was a senior here, I did a whole bunch of interviews, and it was kind of interesting. It was right when airlines introduced frequent flyer programs.
Oh.
So I piled up a ton of miles on United.
Nice.
Yeah, because they'd come to campus, and if they liked you, they'd fly you out. And I was going out to Silicon Valley a lot, and I got some offers. But I also I remember interviewing. I remember vividly interviewing for a company north of Boston. And they asked me a bunch of questions that I had no idea what the answer was. And they were like circuit design questions. And I was like, well, we're just studying this. So I kind of felt, oh boy, maybe I need to learn some more.
Yeah.
And I just randomly had put in an application to graduate school at MIT and got it. So great. So go to MIT. And I think after my first year at MIT was when I got a job working at Lincoln Laboratory. And then I stayed at Lincoln to do my master's degree out there, and then switched back to campus, blah, blah, blah. So, that was kind of my career. And it was always, when I was finishing it up at RPI, I knew I wanted to go to industry. But then I felt, well, maybe I should learn a little bit more. And I thought, I'll get a master's at MIT, and then I'll go to industry. But when I got the master's on a lark, I applied for the PhD qualifying exam, and I passed. And I was like, well, okay, so might as well stay. But when I finish, I'm going to either start a company or I'm going to, and then I interviewed at a couple of places, and MIT and Stanford offered me a job, and I was like, I wanted to go to Stanford, but Lynn's twin sister was in Connecticut. Our families are on the East Coast, and we made a decision on family versus career.
Right.
But obviously things worked out fine. So, but I guess what I'm saying is for me, it was kind of a random walk, but it was all about looking for opportunities and picking what seemed like the best one at the time.
Right, and it's always crazy how you think you were going to go to industry so many times and your life never went in that direction.
Yeah, so what I ended up doing though, which was the way I scratched that itch, was most of my research was sponsored by industry when I was on the faculty. And I got really excited about transferring technology from our lab into companies. And then eventually we started up a lot of companies out of our research on campus.
Yeah, that's awesome. So another thing that I found early in my career is mentorship is extraordinarily important. So can you tell us about an insightful mentor you had and how they affected your career journey?
Well, I've had a lot. I think a natural mentor for you when you're a graduate school is your PhD advisor. But there were also senior faculty members at MIT that, were generous with their time in advising me. But then I think when I joined the faculty, in addition to my senior faculty colleagues when I was a junior faculty member, I started going to a lot of conferences in my field. And what I found was building relationships between leaders in the field. And the one thing I would say to any young alumni is, generally speaking, senior people in fields really enjoy mentoring. They like to be able to share what they know in the hopes that it's helpful. And so, I tapped into that. So there were probably 3 or 4 people that were the kind of the leaders in my field, seniors, most of them in industry, interestingly enough, but they were always open to giving me advice and pointing me in the right direction. So there's a little bit of that. And then, your parents are obviously an important mentor. And then the one real important mentor for me was Lynn. I mean, Lynn has a counseling psychology background. So, one of my challenges early on, growing a research group and then running a research lab and then running the nanotechnology facility, was, you're managing humans.
Yeah.
and you have to know what to do there. And I got a lot of great advice from Lynn whenever I'd come back home and say, I can't understand this.
Sometimes the hardest engineering problem is the people, right?
Yeah.
In our stuff. That's amazing. So going back to kind of what you were talking about earlier with your struggles with finding a job, and you said, it was even hard to get a job at McDonald's. We're seeing a very similar economic times right now where we're seeing it's really hard to get jobs out there. So what would you say to an RPI grad who's struggling in their early career right now? And don't be afraid to give us some tough love here. We can take it. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, you've no doubt seen that, if you Google Gen Z and the workforce, there's all this stuff out there where employers are saying, I don't want them. They don't have a good work ethic. They expect to be promoted within 3 months. They don't act appropriately in the workforce, and so on. And so I think that's kind of a challenge. Now, I personally don't think that's representative of an RPI graduate, because you certainly know how to work hard. And so I think, but I would say that our requirement, effectively ARCH, is a requirement to go get an experience in your major before you graduate. It has 2 effects. One is it helps you develop that knowledge of what is it going to be like, so you're going in with that deeper understanding, just like any co-op would. But the other thing it does is that RPI is tough, and you can take a hit to confidence. So the ability to go out and work and have people say, whoa, you're doing really great stuff, that's a positive confidence boost. So I think that helps. Second thing is we're collecting a lot of data on what employers say about our students when they're on their Arch Away or if they're in a summer internship. So we query them. We get survey information. So we have some really robust data that we want to push out to employers, saying, look, this is what other people are saying about these students. So I think those are the things that help. But then for the individual, I always used to say to my sons, just work 10% harder than everybody else.
Yeah.
So if everybody's leaving the office at 5, stick around till 5:30. I mean, don't play video games, but do but if you're doing 10% more, you're going to stand out. And then when somebody's looking around saying, who can we give this job to? Well, that guy's always working.
Right.
So I think there's that. I think seeking advice and listening is really important. What else did I think about? I think be present. I think in a land of fully remote, that's a death sentence, in my opinion, for somebody who wants to advance in their career. So being visible, being present is really important. So look for the one that's 3 days in person at least. And volunteer. So if something happens and somebody's doing something, volunteer your time to help. Maybe you'll learn something, but people will think, oh, that person is really, eager to do stuff. But in doing that, don't overcommit, because the worst thing you could do is not deliver on things.
Right. I feel like that's a lot of RPI students. They're very eager to help, very hardworking, and say yes, yes, yes. And sometimes it is good to say no, right?
Yeah.
In those circumstances. So we talked about yet again the struggling job market, and we looked up some numbers here, and a degree like computer engineering is sitting at like a 7.5% unemployment rate right now, which is extraordinarily high. So how you talked a little bit about like Arch and other things, but how else is RPI differentiating to continue to have students prepare them for the job market?
Yeah, well, I think it's, we're doing a lot more with, I always forget the acronym, CCPD.
Yeah.
So more career training and things like that. Again, I think it's getting students to commit to find an experience in their major is probably the most important thing we do in preparing them. So I think that's obviously incredibly important. The other thing that I would say, and we're working towards this, is, and if we have a chance, we can talk about the strategic plan. But one of the elements is building alumni relations, and is very interesting. When R.J. Scrins was here for reunion, we had a fireside chat, and one of the questions I asked RJ is, I said, why'd you get a PhD? Because Elon Musk is an existence proof that you don't need a PhD to do an electric vehicle company. And RJ said, well, I needed a credential, and Elon Musk's credential was PayPal. And so he thought, well, if I get a PhD from MIT, maybe that's a credential that helps me. And so he did that. But what was interesting about it was his first money into Rivian was from an RPI or from an MIT alumni. And he found that alumni through a database that MIT maintains of alumni that students can access. And so we're building that. And what's interesting, when I met with RJ later in Palo Alto later that year, I told him, RPI really needs to do this. We have a great and highly accomplished alumni network. And RJ said to me, Marty, he said, if I get an email from a student, my chances of responding go up exponentially if it's a student from RPI, right? So I did a test experiment on this year, which is that I sought out a couple of students that I knew and asked, do you have a job? Are you looking for a job? And I started connecting them. Most of them, it was about 3 or 4 hockey players, men's and women's. One wanted a job in pharmaceuticals, and I thought of a board member who used to be a senior executive at J&J, who had told me he loves mentoring people. So, I contacted him. Within an hour, he got back to me, said, yeah, connect me with her. She's got a job in biotech. Nice. Same thing with an alum or a student who wanted to be in Boston in wealth management. Well, so we searched our database. We had about 6 alumni in Boston that work in the investment industry. He's got a job. He got a job within like a month and a half, I think.
Oh, wow. That's really fast.
Yeah. Well, I was like, why did you wait until graduation? But that's an aside. But, so the experiment is demonstrated, which is that our alumni, if contacted, will help. And so we're going to build that. And I think that's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, I've experienced like very similar things of like our alumni network is so deep and so wide that like if you have an interest somewhere, we have someone who can help you. Like there's somebody out there, which is really amazing, honestly. So kind of going back to something you said earlier about like the reasons young grads and new grads are getting terminated, like we've noticed that top reasons that are cited are lack of motivation, lack of professionalism, which is yet again very different from like previous generations. So you've talked about like in the classroom or some of those other things, how RPI is preparing students in addressing those, but how is RPI addressing some of those things through like extracurricular opportunities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. When I look at the student-run union, I mean, the skills that the people that participate in some of those government roles, are really valuable skills, right? The fact that you're managing a budget and you have to understand how that works. But then you can look at all the extracurricular things we have. You can look at ARCOS. And I remember talking to a parent my first year. Actually, I think it was Gabriel's mom.
No, he's back.
Yeah, I think it was. It was actually. And she was saying it's great that he's involved in ARCOS because the experience he's getting there in terms of managing software development is what you wouldn't get for 5 years in industry. So we have the two-stage rocket club who are synthesizing their own fuel, because they have to control the burn rate. It's just
wild.
And I met with there's a new club at RPI called RPAI. So this is a AI club, and I met with the club officers. They had just formed at the end of the spring term, and they said, well, the club president told me, well, I really wanted to understand how to program a large language model, so I taught myself that in the summer. And what he said is that, if I wanted to learn about large language models at RPI through the curricular experience, it's not going to be until like junior year that I get into it, and it's very theoretical. And I just wanted kind of the practical elements. So that's what RPAI is going to do, is create a student club like ARCOS that you get that kind of exposure. I think it's genius, and I think what I've been told by people like our computer science faculty is a lot of employers, the first question they'll ask you is, what were your projects in ARCOS before they look at your GPA? So I think as employers become familiar with some of these experiences beyond the classroom, it's a great thing to list in your resume.
Right, and AI is such a buzzword nowadays. You see that, it's enticing already, especially with the quantum computer. You guys are really integrating a lot of this forefront technology into the curriculum and into clubs, which is really great to see. It's putting the students at the forefront of where they should be, which is excellent. So.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's top of mind for people is particularly unemployment rate for computer science graduates. And I think there's this general fear that with ChatGPT able to do basic coding, and I think what we have to do as an institution is say, okay, fine, let's not, run away from that, but let's say, okay, now that that's the case, then we should be using that in the courses we're teaching, so that our graduates know how to use ChatGPT, so go up the level.
Exactly. I literally this morning when I was working had one of my new hires teach me. He was like, "Oh, I can just put this into one of the things and it will show me all this code." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like my mind was blown. So getting the students that experience it's going to help them really get ahead.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I was asked, I think it was last year at a student forum, are we going to have any policies on the use of AI? And it was funny because I was reminded of. So I was the first class at RPI that used calculators. So we were required to have a TI or an HP calculator, and there was a big debate about which was better. Because the prior class brought slide rules. And I learned how to use a slide rule in high school. And what's interesting about slide rule is you have to understand the order of magnitude, in order to do it. And so, and the thing people complained about digital calculators when they first came out here was, well, the students punch in numbers, and if they punch a wrong number in, an answer comes out that's garbage, but they don't have a sense of scale to know whether 10 to the 23 is way too big for the, but you would never have that happen to you with a slide rule. So there's a loss associated with going to that technology, and it's probably the same thing can be said about having ChatGPT do your coding, but hey.
Yeah, right. But there's also so much to gain. So it's really exactly. A flip side there. So kind of switching topics here a little bit. Another topic that's often on young alumni's mind is the U.S. administration and how that's affecting things. So given all the complexities, how is RPI preparing for all of that uncertainty?
Well, I've said to a lot of people that to me, it's a little different now, but in the past several months, this felt very much like I felt during the early days of COVID. You knew bad stuff was happening or going to happen. You had no idea how bad it was going to be, and exactly you weren't sure how you should plan for it. It was completely uncharted water, and you were looking at the news almost on an hourly basis to see what was changing. That's the way I felt, and so I think done what we should do, which is plan for the worst, hope for the best, right? So we've held back on spending. We've sort of slowed some of our growth ambitions in terms of spending, and really tried to focus on making sure everybody's doing okay. So we talked earlier about the international students. We saw a big slowdown in research awards the first quarter. It started to pick up, so we're kind of cautiously optimistic that maybe that'll come back. We're heartened by the fact that there are certain things like semiconductors and quantum that are priorities of this administration as they were the past. So cautiously optimistic, I guess, is what I'd describe it.
Preparing as best you can, but it seems like you're really checking in with students and with the campus to also see what they need support on, which is honestly the most important part here. Because yet again, it's an institution, it's academics, but it's all about the people here at RPI. So I love to hear it. So switching a little bit on a lighter note, reunion homecoming is coming up. At the time of filming this, it's about a month and a half away. And it's a wonderful time for people to come together. You get to see your old friends. It's just, I come every year and it's just absolute joy. So can you tell us one of your favorite memories of reunion homecoming?
Well, last year's reunion was outstanding. I mean, we don't know if this is true, but we think it might have been the best attended reunion. We had more than 2,500 people. Part of what helped us was a lot of affinity groups that might normally get together at other times in the calendar, sometimes in Troy, sometimes in other locations. Because it was the bicentennial year, people thought, well, let's go back for that. And credit to the alumni staff in IA, as we started getting these inquiries more than a year before the reunion, they really said, okay, well, let's work on this. Let's help these folks find a place to have dinner if they want to have a dinner with their fraternity, or if they need an event venue, or if they, for example, with the drone show, we created dedicated spaces on one of the fields so that they could be there as opposed to in the stands with everybody else. So we tried to make sure that there was space in the calendar of the reunion weekend so they could program things that didn't compete with the reunion. So we'll see where we land this year in terms of attendance, but I think going forward, there's a lot we can do that makes reunions more meaningful for more alumni rather than people, I think the tradition has come back in your 5-year, 10-year, and so on. And so that's something we want to, and there's a lot that could be done. I was talking to an alumni who's in a very senior position in a company on the West Coast, and he's also a graduate of Harvard Business School. And he said, when I came back for my year reunion at HBS, they had a panel where I was invited to speak. Comes back to what we said earlier. If we start having panels with accomplished alumni at various levels in various industry sectors, I think alumni will want to come back to get that networking opportunity. But we just have to, I think, in part because of the financial challenges over the crossover and COVID, the staffing in the alumni function as well as the advancement function was significantly reduced. And so we're building it back up. It was 36 people when I arrived. With the help of the board, we're up to 90. And so I think we're going to get better at, building more exciting reunions, but also supporting the clubs around the country.
Right, and really just engaging everyone where they're at, because I know a lot of people's connection to RPI is the club they're in, whether that's pep band, they were on the hockey team, right? So they're really connecting to those affinities. That's great that you're doing that. And as we've already talked about many times, like the alumni network is big, so if we can lean into that and offer, say, hey, like you're going to build your network larger, that's going to be really enticing for a lot of people.
And what's interesting is that if you look at the demographic of who came last year, it's kind of the early young alumni, good attendance, it dips and then it goes back up. And so here, life takes over. Kids, careers, So I think we have to meet the alumni where they are, and I think we need to think about holistically about how we engage with alumni throughout their careers.
Yeah, really keep that cycle, keep them coming back, exactly. So looking ahead to Reunion Homecoming this year, there's a ton of fun events out there. I know the YAC is doing a trivia event, but there's tons of other fun events as well. So which event are you most excited for during Reunion Homecoming besides the hockey game? So,
you know what, The class, the 5, 10-year, 20, those reunion, they all have dinners, and usually if we could fit them all in the Hilton Garden Inn, those are fun. I mean, it's really meeting those different generations of alumni. They're excited, they're inquisitive, and so Lynn and I really enjoy interacting with the alumni in those events. We're working on some speakers that haven't been able to commit yet, but if they commit, I'll be excited about that.
Yeah. And I also love those class dinners too, because it's like you're at your table or you're mingling with people, but then afterwards everyone's coming together for like desserts and stuff, and it's great to just yet again continue to mingle with people around.
Yeah.
I look forward to reunion homecoming every single year, and it's my 5-year this year, so we're
right.
really especially excited. So
I'll see you in the Hilton
I
Garden
know,
Inn.
I'll see you at the Hilton Garden Inn. So the most happening place in Troy. But anyway, thank you so much, Dr. Schmidt, for taking the time to answer all of our young alumni burning questions today. And thank you to everyone who is watching, and we hope to see you at reunion and homecoming or any other alumni events in the future. If you're interested in finding out some alumni events in your area, these events and other alumni news can be found at alumni.rpi.edu. So thank you guys all for watching, and thank you, Dr. Schmidt, and we will see you all at the next Talking Knowledge and Thoroughness.